Hey everybody, it's Andrew again, your average jeweler, and today we are talking about gemstone value. Now you might be thinking you have a pretty good handle on what value is, but I'm here to tell you and maybe just remind you, gemstone value is completely different. When we look at most things, we know that more is generally valuable compared to less. And we know that better craftsmanship is going to be more valuable than cheap craftsmanship. And we also know that good reputation is valued more than no reputation at all. So why is gemstone so different? Well, I have spent many years figuring this out, and I am here to explain to you in detail some of the biggest factors in determining gemstone value. And today we're going to talk about the first 2 out of 4, and by the end of this, you should be able to understand gemstone value and how it works. So thanks again for being here. If you're new to the channel, I'm here to try and help the average person make sense of general jewelry questions. Most of us don't have a strong handle on jewelry, but I want you to understand a little bit about it, and that's why I'm here. So if you'll stay with me, if you can subscribe to the channel, you'll definitely have a chance to learn more, and you can click the little notification button to know when something new is out. But today, we're talking gemstone value. So I already mentioned we're going to be looking at part of what makes gemstone value. We're only going to be able to fit some of it in one video, and I am going to talk about the other things in another video altogether. So I just want everybody to understand that when we talk about gemstones, we are talking about genuine, natural gemstones. We're not talking about lab-grown or synthetics today or imitations. We're talking about genuine gemstones. And that's important because, again, we're trying to objectively figure out how gemstones are valued. So number 1, and this one might be the most obvious, but it's size. And in jewelry, or more specifically gemstones, it's usually referred to in carat, which is carat weight. So it's actually a unit of measurement, and carat is referenced in small increments because gemstones are usually smaller. So when people talk about a carat, it's generally 1/5 of a gram. So you have an understanding of what that weight looks like. Now this is not to be confused with carat gold. Carat weight is spelled with a C. Carat gold is spelled with a K. Now that conversation for explaining why that is, that's going to have to wait for another day. But I want you to understand that when we look at gemstones, we are judging their size generally by weight. And that is why you see it in carat. Now occasionally you will see some gemstones measured by millimeters. That's also not uncommon, but a lot of us are going to look for the weight. So you're going to see that. When it comes to size, it should seem fairly obvious why this is a general principle for determining the value. This is one of those more is going to be more valuable than having less. And finding larger gemstones is exponentially more difficult than finding the little ones. So when it comes to size, that's a big determining factor that's actually a little bit easier to wrap your head around. So that's not one that I expected you to be really confused about, but definitely one I wanted to cover today. All right, so number 2. Number 2 is going to be the much bigger thing or factor that we're going to look at today when it comes to gemstone value, and that is general beauty, the overall aesthetics, the color. How pretty is the stone? That's what we're trying to get at. And this is where people probably become confused to start, because you look at one thing and you wonder, how can somebody objectively value beauty? That's a question that's been asked before, but there is a method, and it's a method that throughout the jewelry industry, and when you talk to gemstone dealers, you're going to find that they use certain criteria to judge how valuable a gemstone is within its own category. So what does beauty look like in gemstones? Well, similar to diamonds, they use some of the same criteria, but it looks completely different. You cannot judge gemstones how you judge diamonds. So when it comes to colored gemstones, you're going to also look at the cleanliness of the stone, or the clarity. So when you see inside the gemstone, How clean does it look? Is it totally transparent with nothing distracting? Or does it have what we call inclusions, things outside of its normal chemical structure that take away from the beauty of the stone? They make it look messy or cloudy. And those are going to be things that will affect the value. Generally speaking, a clean gemstone with high clarity is going to have higher value than something that has a lot of inclusions, that again looks dirty, it looks cloudy, it's not as attractive. And so that's one way that we can objectively look at the value of a gemstone. As we talk about inclusions, I don't want to forget to mention some inclusions actually add value. And that is because they make some kind of a pretty or attractive pattern. If you've ever heard of a star sapphire, those are inclusions that run down the gemstone that when put under light in the right direction, you actually see a star pattern. It's very desirable, it's attractive, and it's an example where inclusions can actually add value. Now the next part of beauty, or how pretty the stone is actually going to be the cut. Now much differently than diamonds, because cut is a diamond criteria as well, gemstones are cut to be pretty, or to face up nice in their color. And they can actually control this to a certain extent by cutting the gemstone a little bit shallower, by cutting a gemstone a little bit deeper. They can make changes in the color. A shallower gemstone typically going to look lighter in tone. A deeper gemstone is usually going to look darker. So if they have a really dark gemstone to start with, a really dark crystal, they're probably going to try and cut it a little bit shallower to mitigate the darkness of the stone. They want it to show more of the color, so they're going to cut it shallower. The opposite is true when they have a gemstone that's really light in saturation. They're going to try and cut it a little deeper to see if it improves that. Now, people that cut gemstones have a really good understanding of it, and I am not standing here trying to tell you it's easy to cut gemstones, only give you the principles that they generally use that impact the value and ultimately the color and how it looks. The goal is to make a pretty gemstone, and cutting is just one way that they can influence that. Now, on a little side note, there are fantasy cuts, or cuts that outside of the norm, and they're more sculpture-like usually. Sometimes they make the stone have some interesting brilliance, but a lot of times they're more like little pieces of art. So this is a completely different category that, again, we're not going to talk about today for the purpose of general value and understanding how gemstones are looked at more objectively, but I say it because it is a way that people will cut gemstones to make them more interesting and make them a little bit more like a piece of art. The last and final component of how to objectively judge a gemstone's beauty is going to be that of the color. And the color is probably the largest part of its value. When we talk about gemstones, you'll sometimes hear the phrase, "color is king." Now, color is a hard thing to view objectively, and rightfully so. Not everyone thinks the same things are pretty. And part of that is the color that they see. People have different favorite colors. Not everyone likes the same thing. So how do we go about trying to figure out the value of color? Well, there's a few things that we can look at objectively, and that's what professionals are trying to do. So let's look at those criteria. So if we're trying to objectively look at color, there are a few things that professionals will use, and we're at least going to talk about the generals of that, and we'll probably try and talk about the specifics of color in another video. But the general observations when you're looking at the value of color is going to be the tone, how dark or light is it? It's going to be the saturation, how vivid is the color, and then it's also going to be the hue, or the general color itself. Red, blue, orangish red, purplish blue. You know, these are all varieties of hue. And when you consider the general hue of a stone, is it blue? And then you look at the saturation of the stone. Is it a vivid blue or is it a light blue? And then you look at the tone of the stone. Is it really dark, almost black looking? Or is it almost clear because the saturation is so low? And that's something that you can use to objectively think about why one gemstone might be more valuable than another. So we've looked at the first 2 criteria of what I believe are 4 big criteria in judging gemstone value. And that means that you only have half the story. And I want to fill in all those blanks, but we're saving that for another video so that you can come back and actually get the rest of the story. I'd like to hear below if any of this information has surprised you. I enjoy your comments, I enjoy your feedback. If you haven't liked the video already, make sure to do that so that others know there's value here. And if you haven't subscribed, consider subscribing. But ultimately, I want you to come back, learn more, keep learning, and stay tuned.